Good morning and welcome to this week's episode of Iconic Freedom, The Formula. Here we set a standard for accountability and responsibility, the ownership of your choices and your outcomes and everything that follows. Let each care for self and all will be cared for. So when I talk about the formula, we talk about that periodic chart that you see on the various websites that this is posted on, where you create those elements that come together and bring harmony to your life. And if one of those elements in your life is not working, then you extract it and you reevaluate it and, again, bring that harmony to your life. This season has been about posture, in a sense, right? Embodiment, standing in choice, knowing when silence is the answer, reaching the end of explaining, and then sitting in what follows. When you stop filling space yourself, something else inevitably happens. Others will try to step in to fill it. So what does all that mean? Well, when others start to fill in the silence, when you stop explaining, the space doesn't remain neutral, in a sense. Silence invites response because people are uncomfortable with silence. And when there's no longer a narrative being supplied, others then begin to supply one of their own. And this is what I definitely call creating the backstory. And it's not always with malice, and it's not always consciously, but almost always it's with certainty. And let's talk a little bit about certainty. Certainty is what the mind manufactures when it cannot tolerate the ambiguity or the waiting or the not knowing or the lack of control. So it decides instead. Because reality exists independent of opinion, of course, and it unfolds in time, over time. It does not rush. It has no timeline. It does not reassure. That's something we project onto it. And it can be observed without projection because you're not in emotion. Reality would say, right, this is what it is, whether you like it or not. Certainty that gets manufactured is internally generated. It's emotionally motivated because a person wants to have a story, right? It collapses complexity into conclusion and prefers what I would say is the speed over accuracy because it makes people feel safe, like, oh, I know, certainty would say, in this instance, I need this to mean something now so I can feel stable. And certainty is often forged from the fear of the unknown and the inability to sit inside reality while it unfolds. And a premature conclusion used to stabilize, say, your nervous system, as an example. What people call certainty is often just premature closure, a false sense of resolution that gets used to avoid sitting in the unknown, trying to find the answer when you don't know the answer. And when someone locks into certainty, or what I think is self-righteousness, they don't just take a position. They wind up cornering themselves because they've decided what the story is. They pre-commit to a conclusion, but so tightly that any new information then becomes a threat. And once you get cornered with your certainty, there's only one thing left to protect, right? Which is your image of being right. So silence doesn't remove the certainty, and certainty, even false certainty, feels safer to many people than reality. What are those reasons? Well, I've jotted a few down, actually. Reality requires patience. it unfolds in time, and it doesn't necessarily reassure on demand. That's not reality is its own part of nature. It does what it's going to do when it wants to do it. Certainty, a person having certainty in a backstory, they rush in where reality hasn't finished speaking and jumping to conclusions, if you will. So when explanation ends, people don't rush toward truth. They rush toward conclusion because the conclusion feels like control, and control feels like safety, and none of that is reality because all of that is about your emotions. When you're in emotion, you're out of reality. What is it that you think you know with such certainty, creating a backstory? How can you know when reality hasn't fully revealed itself or unfolded? You can't. And what you're calling certainty is a prejudgment mechanism that manufactures a backstory because the organism, that is you, is hostile to an uncontained reality. It doesn't know where it's going, and it fears it. Certainty will not strengthen a position, but what it will do is it will trap a person inside of it. And once the identity gets attached to being right, new information then is going to become dangerous. And from there, everything is about protecting the image of being right, not discovering reality, but by being right. So I'm spending more time on this aspect because it's subtle in how it impacts your life, your choices. When you're unaware that it's happening, then you're repeating a pattern that is embedding itself in you, in a way trying to scam you into thinking that your backstory is the reality, rather than freeing you from that straitjacket of self-righteousness, which is how I vision self-righteousness. So, okay, so let's go back to what fills the space is rarely truth. It's projection. People will assign motives, they'll invent reasons, they decide why you're quiet. And most of what they assign has very little to do with you. In fact, I would say it has nothing to do with you. Silence doesn't create projection, it reveals it from the other person. And this, I think, is the pressure point. You hear the story being told about you, you feel the misunderstanding settling in, the temptation shows up, not to dominate or perform, but to explain again, to correct the record, restore the clarity, make it stop. But here's the distinction I think that matters between explaining versus speaking to reality. Explaining is an attempt to manage certainty. Explaining is an attempt to manage the self-righteousness of I think I know something. I know this backstory. Speaking to reality is simply stating what is, without attachment to how it's received. The temptation isn't to speak truth. The temptation is to restore comfort when people go into this mode of conversation. But comfort is not alignment, and clarity doesn't require this agreement. Reality doesn't argue. It simply exists. It stands. This is where internal authority becomes visible to you. You can care without carrying the burden of another. In whatever it is that they're conversing about, whatever it is they're talking about, you can understand a reason someone needs certainty without supplying it. That they need to feel comforted. They need to hear a story. They need to know the why all the time. You don't need to make them wrong to do what is right for you. Silence isn't punishment. It's congruence. You don't abandon yourself to preserve someone else's certainty. You are who you are with your integrity, with your character, decision to choice, the ability to respond to the choice, and the accountability of the outcome and everything that follows. So let's kind of land this more clearly. Choosing silence does not make the other person wrong. And it does not require you to make yourself wrong by abandoning what you know is aligned with your integrity and character. You are not obligated to manage interpretations that exist because someone refuses to sit with uncertainty, because someone doesn't want to see reality. It is not your job. Relieve yourself of that obligation. Because when you feel obligated to do such, when you know reality, then you're trying to manipulate, image, build, control, whatever the narrative is. You let the truth of your own alignment outlast the noise of the projection from other people. You let reality reveal itself, which we know from this podcast talking about it always will, eventually. No defending, no correcting, no chasing perception. Reality doesn't need a backup. It needs time, and it doesn't need your help. You only speak to it, and that's all you need to do. When others fill the space you no longer occupy, you don't need to rush in to reclaim it. You let what is real, what is reality, outlast what is assumed. And that's not withdrawal. When you're silent, it's not withdrawal, it's discernment. And that's authority. It's your internal authority. So when you become more integrated with your own sense of self, your own internal authority, your own character and integrity built from the personal self-development of decision to choice to the ability to respond to the accountability of all the outcomes, you can sit in silence because everything that comes from you, everything that comes out of your mouth, every action that you have is built on that integrity and knowing. I don't need to know the answer because I know how to respond to whatever happens. I know that I will trust myself to be able to figure it out. People that don't know that about themselves will try to fill the space. They will try to talk it out and talk about it and project onto others and to internalize things that have nothing to do with them, to want to gossip and chit chat and all that other shenanigans that has nothing to do with you and you deciding to be silent. You've reached a place of your own development where silence is a pretty powerful thing. And I would posit to you, I think it's a beautiful thing. Okay, hit that like button if you would. Share it with your family and friends. You never know how it might support them in their endeavor. All the fun links are below, and if you're inclined, feel free to subscribe on Buzzsprout. I am on X and Truth Social, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. The link to my newest book, The Christmas Cookie, Stories from the Counter, is listed below. I'd be grateful and honored if you chose to pick up a copy. It's a collection of heartwarming stories that I quietly say unfold the very principles that we talk about here each week. And until next time, stay sharp, stay sovereign, and as always, remember, let each care for self, and all will be cared for. Make it a great week.